By mid-2004, it had become obvious to the team working on the development of Longhorn, or what was to become Windows Vista, that they were losing sight of what needed to be done to complete this new version of Windows and ship it to customers. Already about 3 years into its development by this point, and at which stage all previous versions of Windows would have already been released to manufacturing, Longhorn had become a bloated, buggy mess, a real step back from XP in terms of reliability, stability and usability. Longhorn was Microsoft's most ambitious release to date, boasting many cutting-edge technologies and feature sets such as WinFS, the Avalon Presentation Framework, and many new user interface experiences. Rather than a case of too little too late, Longhorn's ultimate downfall was just the opposite: too much too early. Developers were simply trying to implement too many new features and too much new code into Longhorn too quickly, without the proper testing or stabilization. In July 2004, Microsoft co-president Jim Alchin, who had overall responsibility for the development of Windows, realised that the development of Longhorn in its current form was simply not going to work. Later that month, Alchin informed Chairman Bill Gates that Longhorn in its current form would never be fit for release. Gates was hesitant about this, arguing that Longhorn development simply needed more time. However, Alchin knew that this would not be enough to save Longhorn. The way Microsoft had developed Longhorn was fundamentally unchanged from the way it had developed previous versions of Windows. However, the sheer complexity and ambitiousness of this release meant that their current development strategy was no longer fit for purpose. After all, Google, Apple, and many other companies had been pushing out software on a much quicker timescale during this period. If Microsoft were to have a chance of competing with these companies, they needed a much quicker turnover for Windows releases. Longhorn needed to be finished, and it needed to be finished quickly. Alchin decided that the best and most efficient way of completing Longhorn successfully was for its current code to be scrapped and for development to start afresh. Alchin enlisted the help of 2 other senior executives at Microsoft to support the Longhorn team in creating a development process that would enforce only the highest levels of code quality. From this point forward, all code would be scrutinised and tested much more heavily before being allowed into the main Longhorn builds. This development reset, as it became known, was announced internally to Microsoft employees on the 26th of August 2004 and began the following month. Work soon started on what was to become known as the Omega 13 part of Longhorn's development, that is, the time directly after the development reset. Omega 13 builds of Longhorn used Windows Server 2003 Service Pack 1 release candidate as a codebase, rather than the Windows Server 2003 release candidate code that Longhorn had been based on up to this point. Probably the first internal Longhorn build to be compiled from the new codebase is a version of build 5000 from the 3rd of August 2004. This build dates from before even the pre-reset build 4093. This is simply because some developers were already using the new codebase, while others were still working with Longhorn's original code. It is therefore difficult to pinpoint an exact date as to when the reset actually occurred. It should also be noted that on the same day that the pre-reset build 4093 was compiled, a certain build 3790 was also compiled, which was a clone of a Windows Server 2003 release candidate build, hence the out-of-place build number. This build was apparently intended to act as a preliminary check that everything post-reset would be able to run smoothly. Microsoft's first post-reset Longhorn build to be shared with the public, build 5048, was shown at the Windows Hardware Engineering Conference on the 1st of April 2005. Many were shocked by this build's closer visual resemblance to Windows XP than that of prior Longhorn builds. However, under the hood, Microsoft were busy reintroducing many features to Longhorn that had been under development over the past few years. There was a lot of work to be done over the next 2 years or so before Longhorn would finally be ready for release. By the time it became known by its final name of Windows Vista, it was in many respects an entirely different operating system to the one it had been originally. Whether this was for the better or worse is, of course, a matter of opinion.